If you were to ask the question why we add herbs and spices to our food, it's simply answered by saying there's something about the distinctive flavor, texture, or aroma of an herb and spice that we find compelling. Let's start by taking a look at one of the most pervasive flavorings embraced by almost every culture in the world: salt and pepper. Salt is where I'd like to begin. Salt is often miscategorized as a spice. It's not a spice at all, it's a mineral. It's one of the only rocks that we eat. Now, there's a whole selection of salts here. All of this salt comes from seawater. Some of it's been trapped underground, and as it dehydrates, it crystallizes, and then it can be mined from underground. But at some point, it was all seawater. There are salts here along the back that I use quite a bit of. Here is kosher salt. It's my all-time favorite. A very pure salt, and because it's ground more coarsely, they don't need to add anything to it to make it flow freely or keep from caking up. So there is kosher salt. Right next door is iodized salt. Iodine is one of the first, actually the first food additive approved by the US government, and they decided to put it into salt because salt was a foodstuff that was so pervasive. This iodized salt is ground a little bit more finely, and so they need to add things to it to keep it from caking up or to keep it flowing freely. There's also a flavor that goes along with the iodine that's added to it, so it's not as true a flavor as kosher salt from my perspective. On this end, I have something called sel gris, or gray salt. This is simply seawater that has been dehydrated until finally all of the water has gone out of it, and everything that was inherent in the seawater is still in that salt. It has more complexity. Certainly it has more minerals. There may even be some plant or animal life that makes its way into that salt. There are health claims that are made for salt like that. I'm a chef. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a biologist, and so I'll leave the health claims to other people. But with salt like this, I do find the flavor compelling and complex, and for that reason I like it. Here is a salt called Maldon salt, and it is an unrefined salt. The thing that's really nice about this is that as it crystallizes, it takes on a very, very delicate flaked conformation, so that when you put it onto food and it crunches on your tongue, it sort of breaks apart very, very easily. I segregated a few of the flakes here, and maybe you can see that it dries in sort of a conical pyramid formation. It's really a delicious salt. Along the back here, my back, your front, there's a number of different salts, and I'll just rattle off quickly what they are. This is a Hawaiian salt that has a lot of clay in it that turns it sort of an orange pinkish color. This is a Japanese sea salt. Over here, I have a salt that's been smoked, and so it has a smoky flavor to it. This comes from Scandinavia, and this salt right here is another sea salt. But unlike this Maldon salt that has the flaky texture, this tends to be a little bit rockier and harder. So I'd want to give this a chance to dissolve, or maybe I would grind it in a mortar and pestle. 99% of the time, I use kosher salt, and then I reach for one of these other salts so that I've got some variety available to me. The finer the salt is ground, the more aggressive it will seem on your palate. So a finely ground salt like this may go on to popcorn as popcorn salt and be very, very salty and encourage you to buy soft drinks. Some of these others, a little bit less aggressive on the palate. Let me pull this back, and I'm going to bring some pepper to the fore. I've got 3 different peppers right here: black pepper, green pepper, and white pepper. They all come from the same plant, and I'll tell you very, very briefly how they're made. All of these peppercorns start as a fresh green peppercorn, like this one in the middle. To take this and turn it into black pepper, the pepper is soaked very, very briefly and then dried, and enzymatic browning can take hold, and you see it go from green to brown like this. As it dries, the outside begins to to crinkle up or shrink up, and that's what gives it this particular conformation. If instead I took the green peppercorn and I soaked it and fermented it for about a week, I could then grind the outside off and I would have white peppercorns. Now, some people like the flavor of the green peppercorns because it is vegetal. Others say they like black pepper because it has a fuller, richer, almost roasted flavor. And then there's some that will tell you that white peppercorn is appropriate for white preparations like a bechamel or mashed potatoes where you don't want to see flecks of black in your food. If you're honest with yourself and you close your eyes and you taste these three peppers, you'll notice them as very different. Green tastes vegetal. It has the burn of pepper but tastes very green and vegetal. Black has a full, rich, satisfying flavor. And then the white peppercorn tastes a little bit sour to me. And for that reason, I'm not a big fan of it. But you can make the decision yourself whether you like white, green, or black peppercorns. Now, one more. This is an outlier. This is Szechuan peppercorns, and it's not a true peppercorn. It's very popular in Szechuan, and it's popular because they have a word to describe what this does to your palate. It has sort of a numbing effect on your palate. If you take it in and you chew it up, very quickly you'll find that your cheek and your tongue have gone numb. And they actually like that quality in their food. That characteristic of Szechuan peppercorn, its numbing quality, can be downplayed a little bit by toasting that spice in a pan before you grind it up and use it. But I think of this not as a true peppercorn, but simply as an outlier. So here we have it. Salt and pepper. So let me share with you that salt has very powerful antimicrobial properties, and that's quite possibly one of the reasons that we add it to our food. And pepper is protective against botulism, but more than that, it makes bacteria more susceptible to the plant chemicals that are found in herbs and spices. So in a real way, there's a protective benefit to be gained from salt and pepper more than just flavor. It's almost as if our appreciation of salt and pepper and our liking of salt and pepper is a learned behavior.